I guess we should go ahead and get started. This is going to be a improvisational session. I've never done this before. If everybody could come sit close, maybe you want to ask questions or something, and also there's going to be like tiny code up on the screen. So if you want to come sit in the first few rows, I think that'd be better. The idea here is I'm going to pull up PRs and read through them and talk about what I'm thinking. So I guess there's two sorts of people that might be interested in this. There's people who might want to write APIs, and there's people who might want to review APIs. Could you raise your hand if you think you might want to eventually write an API? Okay. And if you think you want to maybe eventually start reviewing APIs, can you raise your hand? Okay. So we'll make both sorts of comments. So I've got 4 candidate things that I'm just going to go through, and maybe while I'm looking at those, or if it looks like we're going to run out, you all can help me choose which one to look at next. So I'm Daniel. I'm stealing this slide from my other talk later in the week. I'm Daniel. I'm TL or co-chair, co-TL of SIG API Machinery. I work at Google. I've been working on Kubernetes since before it was a thing, before it was open source. So I have lots of context and history, and I know where the bodies are buried. So shall we just dive right in? Yes, I can zoom, I think. That did not seem to work, did it? Let's see. Zoom in. I thought I used that. My computer says it has zoomed in, but it does not appear. Oh, there we go. Okay, maybe that's a little too much. Slightly delayed reaction. Okay. There we go. So this is just a random API-changing PR. Whenever I look at a API-changing PR, the first thing I try to do is figure out what is the purpose of this. What are they trying to accomplish? What do they think they're trying to accomplish? And then I look at like, well, let's see if we can figure out what this API change is about. Add node API staging repo with Runtime Class API. So the API part of it is going to be something about Runtime Class, which we're all going to learn about together. So let's see. Include a new staging repo, adds but doesn't implement Runtime Class, and there's even a link to a KEP. So let's see. Let's take a look at the commits and see what's in there. Sometimes people are very nice and they group commits logically with like generated code in one chunk and API changes in another commit. So let's see. I think Tim might have done that. Generators, API types. Node API repo. Okay, let's look at the API types. So after I've got like some context, the next thing I try to do is I look at the types, right? So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more. Actually, let's do unified here. Since this is mostly new code, I think, yeah, I got to reload. Since this is mostly new code, it'll be easier to read like this, okay? Now, it is super important to have good documentation in the APIs because the comments that you put on your APIs end up going into the release documentation that end users see. So it's important to give people context. That's probably the most common sort of comment I find myself making is like, I can't really understand what this is or how you use it. And it's hard if you come to, if you're writing your API, you know what your feature is, you know how it's used, you have this model, this mental model of how all the pieces work together and all that, but I've never seen your API before, so if I can't figure it out from the comments, probably people who have less context in the system will also have a really hard time. So, okay, this is a pretty short one. So let's start with runtime class. Okay, this seems to be the root object, right? Like our types usually have like a thing that has spec, maybe it's got a status, and maybe there's something else that's got like a list type. So let's read runtime class. Runtime class defines a class of runtime supported in the cluster. So at this point, like I already have a comment which is I am not sure what that means. Like what is a runtime? Maybe it means a Docker container runtime. That's my guess, but it's not clear, right? Like it doesn't say is it related to nodes? So I'm going to read a little bit more and then figure out what kind of comment to leave. So let's see. We have a type meta and object meta. Those are always on our types, so that's pretty standard. One thing that's good to check is that the JSON tag names match or are correct in some way. That has been at least partly automated now by Howie sitting over there, so I don't have to be quite as careful as I used to. So this is very simple. This object has a spot for the type, it's got a spot for the object meta, and it's got a spec. And the comment on the spec is specification of the runtime class with a more info link that appears to link to the general API object definition. So what I'd really like to see here is and here we have also a runtime class spec is a specification of a runtime class. So I don't know about you, but I like to see in comments things that I couldn't have figured out from the name, right? Like, I mean, it's great that it means that your name was good, right? Like, if the name is as expressive as the comment, that's a point in favor of your name. It's not a point in favor of your comment. We're not just making these comments to make GoDoc happy with us. Well, maybe some of us are, but in API types, hopefully, we're writing these comments to help people understand the system. So instead of this is sort of general, my theory on code comments in general is like, don't tell people what the code is doing. People can read the code. The exception being if you're doing something especially subtle, in which case maybe you should think about not doing that. But if you have to do a subtle thing, then okay, tell people what the code is doing. But most of the time you want to tell people why you wrote that code or why you did it that way as opposed to some other way, right? So it's the same with API types. So is a specification of a runtime class. Okay, let's see. We have one member and it's called a runtime handler. So let's see if this comment helps us. Runtime handler specifies the underlying runtime and configuration that the CRI implementation will use to handle pods of this class. Okay, so apparently pods have some relationship to runtime classes. The possible values are specific to the node configuration and CRI implementation. Who here knows what CRI stands for?
Container runtime interface.
Yeah, container runtime interface. But the fact that less than half of you raised your hand tells me that maybe we shouldn't use the abbreviation. Like if this is somebody's introduction to runtime class and what it means, I think this isn't clear enough. So the possible values are specific. Yes, please.
It's an API. The whole runtime API is to be passed to CRI.
So the purpose of this API is to be passed to the runtime interface. Okay. Maybe we should say that somewhere in the comments.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just read the rest of this. This is literally the first time I looked at this PR, so we're not. It is assumed that all handlers are available on every node, and handlers of the same name are equivalent on every node. If this is not specified, a default will be chosen by the implementation. So, and runtime handler, and it's a string. It is a pointer to a string because it's optional. Okay. So, and then a list is just a list. Okay. So I think I have a good feeling for the structure of this. It's pretty short and simple, so that's good. So now, yeah, we can double check some mechanical things like, okay, it's optional. That means it's a pointer. It means it's got omen empty. Those match. That's good. JSON runtime handler matches this. The JSON tag name is lowercase. The Go name is uppercase. That's all good. You can see here that the protobuf generator has been run. Humans don't type this stuff. Machines will get that right for you. So that mechanically, it seems to be correct, which is good. Like we've got the instructions to the generated stuff up here. Okay, so now we're at the stage where we have to give constructive feedback.
Maybe it's better not to use links and then use like commits for the API conversions.
Yeah. So maybe the comment is maybe we shouldn't use links for the API conventions. Yeah, that's a good question or good thought. I think that we do this in many of our resources. I think stuff like metadata, that may be okay because it really is, like we don't want this documented separately. That means if we change it, we have to update it in a dozen places. So that part's okay, I think. But this usage on Spec right here, I think is a little bit problematic. I don't think readers of this type need that documented as much as what is a runtime class spec and what does that mean. So I think now we're at the part of the API review where we have to figure out how to phrase our comments. Yeah.
This looks like a data resource. It doesn't look like it doesn't have a status, right?
Yeah, that is correct. It does not appear to have a status. It appears to be specification only.
Yeah. Maybe it's better to inline like a string.
Should we inline this string? I think, so I think there's a broader question, which is this object all spec or is it all status? Are users allowed to change the handler, or is the handler something like a fact that kubelet is going to report back about the system? And I don't see enough information in this to know the answer to that. And I also haven't read the runtime class KEP, so I don't know the answer to that. See, actually, sometimes it's kind of a benefit to not having read the KEP because this way you know, you know if you can understand it from the comments that it's going to work okay. All right, how do people feel? Would you like to see me actually write the comments that I would write out for this, or should we go to the next one? So raise your hand if you're in favor of seeing me type comments laboriously. Okay, let's at least do one. Okay, so let's see. What do we think is the clearest? I mean, I can say multiple times like this comment doesn't seem clear enough, but maybe we can be more helpful than that. I think for me the thing that I would like to see here is an explanation of, yeah, like what is a runtime handler? What is CRI? So usually I start writing and then let's see. I'll start typing a little bit and we'll see what we do here. So runtime class defines a class of runtime. Can we make the comments here clearer? Assume runtime means container runtime, but not everyone will have the context to realize that. Okay, let's start with that. And
Yeah, because actually it's not the container runtime, it's the runtime engine that they were talking about.
okay,
What it is really here is run C or run V or cat
Yeah.
containers or something else.
So in that case, I think I'm going to leave my comment as written because the author will be like, oh, you got it completely wrong. So I'm illustrating the error that I expect people to make. Sure, I'm just going to go ahead and submit that comment. Let's see. Okay, so runtime class spec is a specification of a runtime class. Can we make this comment more helpful? What sorts of things about runtime class? Gotta make it pretty. Runtime classes need to be specified. Why would I want to specify them? Okay. I think if I didn't have those questions about this comment, then it would be better. Okay, that's good. I think this one is possibly one of the more confusing ones. So at least I'm first going to say, can we spell out CRI at least once? Can we say what the relationship between this object and CRI is? Okay. Question?
The comment also says it's the runtime and configuration, but it's just a string, so like a JSON.
Yeah, that's a great point. What should people be packing into this string? Let's say that here. Let's try not to shout. Can we give an example of what people might put in this string? And let's also, this is optional. I'm curious, when should I specify it? Yeah. That's a great question. So the question is a present but empty string equivalent to an absent string? And the answer is yes or no. It's kind of like the quantum superposition of two states. If you're looking at the wire let's pick the JSON representation. A absent string means the field is omitted completely. A present but empty string means the field is present with a colon, like quote, quote. You can imagine, although I think, JSON doesn't really have the concept of a type or whatever. You can imagine somebody typing out a JSON file that is present, colon, null. So the wire format can express those things, but it's kind of up to the people who are reading the wire format as to how they interpret that. So
Here it says omit empty. So.
yes, here it says omit empty, and it's a pointer to a string, which means it would only be omitting it if the pointer were nil. So you will either have this means you'll definitely be able to tell whether the user added the string or not. And if they added the string, then you'll get a value there, and you'll be able to tell if they've put a empty string or provided a string. So yeah, actually that's another thing we can ask here, which is it okay for a user to provide this string with an empty value? Yeah, okay. There was something else that I wanted to ask about this, which is, oh yeah, who are the actors that are expected to work with this object? Who's writing it? Who's reading it? And I think that a good place to say that is by the top level type. And the actors that will read and or write this object. Okay. So this is often like what the first round of review for me on an API is. Yeah, another question.
We haven't read the cap. You and I haven't, but this looks like a case of saying all these different things need to be configured in their own way, need way to tunnel through configuration. And this is a whole lot of ceremony
Yeah.
following our normal style and protocol here, basically saying there's a string you cram down the throat of this thing and scanner plays the push.
Yeah, so that is, so to rephrase, the thought is that maybe this is a way of plumbing some sort of untyped blob of data from somebody who knows what it should be to somebody who needs to consume it. I really hope that's not what this API is about, because that's hard in the system. Like in theory, the Kubernetes API is kind of type safe, and if you're dodging that, you make the system worse. In that case, I prefer to see a like individual CRD for every different backend and like something that selects which one, so that way each configuration can still be type safe. 2 questions. Walter, go ahead.
It's sort of something you've already asked, but just kind of finer detail. We have a single optional field, which means if it's not present, you have an empty spec.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of curious what that means to have an empty spec.
Yeah, that's not a bad question. Like what, would it be okay to just omit the object completely in that case? And that's like related to my question, like is that spec or is it status? And who is reading it and who is writing it? And what sorts of sibling fields might we expect to be added in the future? So that might be a reason to, yeah, it's not clear to me.
So can I provide some different context? I'm familiar with runtime.
Oh, okay.
And one thing I've noticed is this implementation kind of conflicts with the KIP, because there are some defined behavior in the KIP that is different from what we've seen here. One specific case is the string is supposed to be which runtime you want to use. There is no configuration in the KIP.
Yeah, that was my interpretation of this.
So that was weird to see. It's like it's supposed to be either Kata containers or like CIO or something. So that's, I'm not sure what to think on that.
Yeah.
Other thing is like the KEP specifies how we handle like if the object is not defined or if it's an empty string or other kinds of stuff. But the main idea is this is an add-on that we don't want to break backwards compatibility. So if it's not specified, if it's empty or null, so we assume that it's legacy, which is not even mentioned here. There's a special class name called legacy, which is the current runtime that default.
Yeah.
So all of these need to be in the code, I assume, otherwise.
Yeah, it does seem like from the PR description that this is kind of a first draft and it's not intended to be complete, so maybe that's okay. But on the other hand, I think the project as a whole is, we're trying to be better. We're trying not to commit partial APIs because sometimes we like to make releases and ship, and it's hard if things are partially implemented. Yeah.
Is there a version of the API specified? Like is it alpha or?
That is a good. It is alpha. Yeah. Yeah, it is alpha. Okay. Shall we go on to the next one? Maybe let's keep going. Okay. This is again. I have not. I looked at these enough to like copy the links and open up tabs, but I haven't looked at the contents at all. So this is a adventure for all of us. Okay. Let's see. This is an API change. It implements an API change after some discussion. So I'm actually, once again, going to read the API change without context because people who come to the API will also be reading it without context. So, and if necessary, we can go read the context next. Let's see. So it fixes this other thing. User-facing change. Okay. We extend the volume subpath environment expansion alpha feature to support environment variable expansion. Ooh, okay. Implements subpath expression field. The field subpath expression and subpath are mutually exclusive. All right. That sounds like some potential backwards compatibility landmines. So let's go take a look and see. Right, like whenever you've got a field, like if it used to be required and now like this other field is optional and like they're mutually exclusive, what about clients that expected the old field to always be present? So hopefully it didn't used to be phrased like that. On the other hand, it's also alpha, so maybe it doesn't matter. It did say it was an alpha field, right? Okay, so let's find, okay, types.go. That is a very short change. But let's find, so if you were here for Stefan's presentation in the last hour, you know that we have versioned types and internal types. And this one is the internal type. The internal types comment is just nice to have. It doesn't actually mean anything. So let's go find the external type definition. And this change has a validation, so that'll be interesting. Okay, so let's find types.go. Okay, let's find the next one. Okay, so here's the external one. Expanded path within the volume from which the container's volume should be mounted. Expanded path. Subpath expression. Okay, I think we need more context on the API object to understand this. Oh, you know what? I'm going to change this again to unified. Sorry. Okay. And, okay, let's get some more context here. So what are we talking about? Okay, volume mounts. Volume mount describes the mounting of a volume within a container. Who here has mounted a volume into a pod before in Kubernetes? Okay, so you have like some context or some idea of what this is doing, right? Like in a pod, you specify the volumes and you specify where they're mounted separately. Okay, that seems okay. So subpath expression and subpath are mutually exclusive. So let's look. Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. The comment is they should be next to each other. Yeah. I think, in fact, let's write that down so we don't forget. Perhaps this field should be immediately after subpath. Okay, I won't send it just yet because maybe I want to say something else too. But let's read the comment on subpath. Path within the volume from which the container's volume should be mounted. Defaults to volume's root. Path within the volume from which the container's volume should be mounted. You know, if I saw that in a API-changing PR, I might ask for that to be made more clear. I'm not sure I understood that. Yeah. Subpath. So I understand mount path. Path within the container at which the volume should be mounted. Must not contain : subpath. Path within the volume from which, oh, okay. So seems like there's a two-phase selection thing going on here. Like there's where do you want it to be mounted in the container? Where do you want it to be mounted from in the volume? Right, so yeah. Yeah.
But the reason that the crucial word there is, the crucial phrase from which, I think, which tells you it's not the target, it's a source set.
Yeah. Yeah, the comment is sometimes you want things in yeah. You want to divvy up your volume. You mounted one volume, different paths go to different containers in your pod, perhaps. I think subpath is a really bad name for that, honestly. It gives you no indication that it is about the source. It is yeah, so mount path, I guess that makes sense, but why wouldn't they call it like source path or yes, I think source path. By the way, target is a terrible name. You can't tell if target means source or destination. It really is not a good name. Don't use it in your API. Sorry,
Might just be a reuse of the variable from the mount command.
yeah, that's possible. Maybe if you're familiar with the mount command. I have to look up the documentation on that every time I use it. So, okay, so subpath expression is somehow related to subpath. Expanded path within the volume from which the container's volume should be mounted defaults to empty quote. Okay, so I guess that the idea is we're going to expand with environment variables this path. However, I don't know what syntax they're using. Are they going to use like bash standard syntax? Are they going to use the like $paren syntax that we have elsewhere in the API? Let's see. Okay, they did the name matches. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add this comment, and I'm going to ask. How is the expansion done? I want to, if I were reading this, I'd want to be clear, like, where do I have to look to understand all the sources that feed into the environment variables? Question?
Yeah, maybe there's a who's expanding?
Yeah, who? That's a good question, yeah. Who is doing the expansion? I will ask that one. Yeah, let's just ask that now. Who, I'll ask what component. I always try to be neutral about components. Like, it's very natural for software engineers to kind of identify with their component, but then if you like try to make a technical criticism, it can come off of as a personal attack. So it's usually good to ask what component and not who. I don't always remember, but I try.
It's the CRI.
The CRI is the component? Oh, cool. I think, yeah, I'm still gonna ask the question. Sometimes, by the way, like these are things that I genuinely haven't seen before, but often, even if I do know what they're doing, I will still phrase all of my criticisms this way. I think that I have found that is much easier to receive than being told that you're wrong. So I try not to do that. So let's see, what component will do the expansion? And finally, what sources of environment variables will be used for the expansion? Okay. Maybe, since this one had some validation. So Walter.
Just one quick question, but I noticed both subpath and subpath expression are optional,
Mm-hmm.
but neither of them are pointers.
Yeah. Cool.
They're trying to have model code, but
Yeah.
now it's kind of people not so disturbing when one accepts the other one not accept.
Yeah. Then we have to, like, how complicated do we want to get? Yeah. So technically, you're providing both of them, even if they're empty, but it's not a problem because they both say the same thing. But that's kind of a weird interaction. I think it would be best if both of them were pointers. Then it would be very clear which one you were choosing, and it'd be easier to, yeah, question.
This, like the addition of the new fields will also be done by like union type and deprecation will.
Yeah, deprecations take so long in our system that I hesitate to ask people to do that.
New field like implies testing with was designed to be union type.
Yeah. Yeah, I also wonder if people looked at, like, what does a variable expansion look like? Was it ever a valid thing that you could put in a subpath? And if not, maybe you can just add this functionality directly. But for now, I'll ask, did consider making this a pointer for extra clarity about whether the user intended to set it? I think that's an okay thought. Yeah.
I mean, you can technically right now make the other subpath string a pointer.
Yeah.
However, this will require. I mean, from API perspective, it's okay because it's not a breaking change, but for Go perspective, it's
Yeah. So the comment is you can make the old field a pointer without breaking the wire format, without breaking the contract. Unfortunately, people with who are using client Go may not be quite so happy with you. But historically, like, we have made people with client Go upgrade every release, and I mean, this is a bug report, not a feature statement. But I think yeah, it might be best if we promoted this to optional. And that said, although it is safe in theory on the wire, at least one or two other bugs have been turned up by people doing this supposedly safe thing. So I'm slightly hesitant to recommend it, but I think I will note it. Make this field a pointer. Am I on the wrong line? Oh, yes, thank you. I am totally on the wrong line. Let's see. Oh, but it won't let me comment there. I can comment. Where did it go? I thought I commented on. Yeah. Okay. You can also consider making Subpath a pointer. That is, I'll say shouldn't be a breaking change. Where? Yeah, okay. I think there's a question way back here. Would you like to come up closer? I think there's also a mic floating around over here.
Yeah, I was just going to say the word expanded is like past tense. To me, like the first thing I thought there was that I'm meant to expand it, or like, yeah. Don't know.
That is a great point. In fact, I will just say that. So it's always awkward using English to describe things you want people to do to an English sentence. How about this? I think it'd be better to describe this as like subpath, but with variable expansion immediately before use or something. Yeah. Do people think that is clear? Okay. Okay. Should we go glance at?
Another question. I can see the author coming back to you and say, "Did you even read the cat?" But I think the intention is that we should understand this without having read it. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, so there's sort of this unstated. I believe it's documented. It's definitely documented in various like Google internal how to do code reviews. But the idea is like the questions I ask, like don't answer me, answer it in the code, like answer in the comments. I believe that is documented somewhere in the community guidelines for Kubernetes. But this is also like this is just something I sort of expect. David wants to tell me something. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we have 10 minutes left, so I want to look at the validation code.
In the internal type, you should not get the optional.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't look at the internal types that carefully. I sort of expect people to like copy back the comments. Like either you should omit them or they should match. And I think typically they match. I'm not quite as worried about the internal types because they're not the source of truth for documentation. So I have lots of things to review, so I have to spend my time carefully finding the places where I can add the most value. Okay, so let's see. Here's a commenter. Recently found issues with this validation and downgrade scenarios. Yeah, I'm a little worried about that too. Won't be able to delete your pods because it will fail this validation. Yeah, remember when I first opened this, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a backwards compatibility concern. So okay, let's see. So they're adding something. If the length is greater than 0, if the feature gate is enabled, okay, that's good. They're using a feature gate. Volume subpath. Okay, then what does it do? It adds a subpath expression. Oh, if you use it and the feature gate is disabled, right? Yeah. Yeah, if it's not enabled, yeah. If it's disabled, subpath expression is disabled. Okay, that sounds okay. Well, does it sound okay though? Yeah, what happens if you
You can check the storage.
yeah, so imagine like this goes in 1.14. We turn it on by default in 1.15. Somebody creates one of these objects that uses it, and then we roll back to 1.14 where it is turned off, and suddenly that API object doesn't validate anymore. So that is a, I call problems like that landmines. So that's a potential landmine. Okay, and then if this other one is not enabled, then, well, that's confusing. Subpath. That's strange. Wouldn't we want to check the new one and not the old one? Oh, this is, okay, this is the old, this is the new object. If the new object is set, then you have to have both things on. If there's already a feature gate for the other one, why do we really need to add a feature gate for this new one? Right, like feature gates there's some overhead that comes with like not code overhead, but like conceptual overhead that comes with those. Mount subpath is greater than 0. Okay, that seems all right. Yeah, so yeah, and it looks like people are already worried about the yeah. Yeah, so we've had a discussion, ongoing discussion about how feature gates should work. My own position is that a feature gate lets you use the feature, but it's not like the primary way you enable it or disable it. It's like an extra safety check at the beginning. So if you manage to set it in an object and the feature gate is on or is off, then you should continue to be able to update the object. Otherwise, you're kind of in a bind if you turn off the feature gate, which is something that you might want to do. It's also sort of the worst time to start exercising new code paths, right? Like the whole reason to turn off the feature gate is because you found a bug, which means you don't necessarily trust the testing of the people who put in the feature, which means that now you've got the feature gate off, but objects that are trying to use the feature, so you're exercising a different set of code paths. So it seems risky. So yeah, I think that we don't have too much time, but that would be my next comment.
Also, there was a check for like whether the parameter set
Yeah, yeah. The comment is testing the string by length greater 0. Way back in the early days of Go, like it was actually more efficient to check the string this way. I believe that hasn't been true for like 3 or 4 years now. However, it kind of got embedded in the project in the early days. I personally also prefer the not equals 0, or not equal empty string. But it kind of got embedded as the style of the project or whatever. So yeah, I'm with you on that one, but I can't ask them to change it.
Maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought at the beginning there was a comment about the field being alpha.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that it's alpha?
That's a good question. So subpath, so maybe that's a reason why we might want a separate feature gate is because that field is beta. Oh, yeah, sorry, that's not, I keep doing that. Yeah, yeah, there's no indication there. Yes, so see, you all are collectively better API reviewers than I am. So I'm gonna say, please state that this is alpha and in which version. Like, what was that? Like non-propagation does. Cool. All right. We've got 2 minutes left. Questions? Further thoughts? Are you all going to go out and review some API changes now? Yeah, please do. It's actually helpful to have somebody go through, and because often like somebody will go out and make changes, and then I come back to it like later with fresh eyes and have to basically reread the whole thing. So it's pretty helpful if somebody can like get the comments fixed or whatever. Yeah.
How do I make sure that my PRs get reviewed, like apart from just following the guidelines? Sometimes you have to ping people in Slack.
How do you make sure your PR is getting reviewed? I have to confess that I have like somewhere in the range of 40 to 60 PRs assigned to me that I'm unfortunately not paying good attention to, basically at all times. So I'm just sort of resigned to the fact that I'm going to feel guilty for the rest of my life. And unfortunately, the way it works, and it'll probably stop working now that I say this, but the way that it works is ping me on Slack. I'm really sorry that it works that way, but yeah, I have like 6,000 unread emails, and it's hard.
Also note Daniel's first call to action. I mean, he doesn't want to admit it, but you know, if you review his PRs and help him out, you probably get to the top of the list. So, you know, review other people's PRs. It's a good way of getting your PRs reviewed.
Yeah, building up karma in the community is always a good way to get this going.
Is there like a style guide anywhere? It seems like some of this stuff, I dare to say, is common sense, like please group common options, please provide descriptive for your types, yada, yada, yada. Like, is there?
Yeah, there is actually a style guide. I think is it perfect and complete? I'm not sure. There is definitely an API conventions document. Maybe we can find it. I always Google stuff. Kubernetes API conventions. Let's see. API conventions. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Oh, oops, what happened there? It's a little old, it looks like, but let's see. Is this style related?
There's also API changes.
Yeah. Yeah, here we go. This is maybe more what I was thinking. Yeah. This is the document I was thinking of. Yeah, so at least some of the stuff I'm saying is hopefully here, and probably a lot more. Please, if you read this and it doesn't seem clear or you'd like it to be improved, like open a PR and just change it to in the ways that you'd like to see it improve. And one way of getting things done is to do it badly, and then other people will will be inspired to come and fix it. That works great. Yeah. Okay. I think we're over time. Thank you, everybody. I hope this was useful.